Good afternoon and welcome to November's Government of Canada Office 365 Council meeting presented by Orangutech. My name is Sylvana, Sales Director here at Orangutech, subbing in for our CEO, Barry Doucette, who typically chairs these meetings. We're so excited for today's presentation. It is the second last presentation of 2020 and our 24th presentation overall. Shannon, I'll get you to change the next slide. Awesome. So before we begin, I just wanted to show a couple of pictures here. The picture on the left is actually our first Office 365 Council meeting that we hosted at Treasury Board in June 2018. There was 18 people around the table and 10 different departments represented. And this was just as departments were starting to understand and look at what it was going to take to move to Office 365. So you can fast forward and look at the picture on the right, and this is actually January 2020. So not too long ago, and we were in the Microsoft office and we had 80 to 100 people showing up month after month to listen to their peers present on their journey to the cloud. Obviously, come March, we were all sent home and Orangutech was forced to pivot and move the Office 365 Council meetings to an online platform. And since then, we've had over 100, sometimes pushing 200 people showing up every month. So I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for continuing to show up each and every month for this community. I know if your calendar looks anything like mine, there's always competing priorities, but it's so important that we continue to join together as a group. We're so excited that this community is continuing to grow, and it is important that we continue to connect and learn together until we can meet in person again. So if this is your first council meeting, welcome. The Office 365 council meetings are designed for departments to present to their peers on their journey to Office 365. So we focus on implementations, plans, challenges, lessons learned. Sorry, we'll go one more slide, Shannon. Yes, implementations, the plans, challenges, lessons learned, and successes. Next slide. So as we all know, this is a Teams Live event. So we will be answering questions at the end. So if you have a question, please ask it in the sidebar, and everyone has the ability to vote or like a question. So if you see a question that resonates with you or your department that you were going to maybe ask, please like it, and those will be the first questions that we ask at the end. And just a reminder, if you can identify yourself when asking the questions, because we may or may not post anonymous questions. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's presenter, Shannon Kenny, Senior Director of Major Projects at Shared Services Canada. And for those of you who have been here for a while, you may remember Shannon presented last year when she was still working for the City of Ottawa. So today she will be presenting both on the City of Ottawa and her experience at SSC and the shared lessons learned from both departments. So I will pass things over to Shannon. Can switch to the next slide. Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you, Sylvana, and thank you to Barry and Orangutech for having me back again for a second time to tell a story. I love to tell a story. So just a little bit about my background. So as Sylvana mentioned, I come from a 17-year career at the City of Ottawa, where I managed many municipal programs over the years, many, and not in the IT field, actually. I was was mostly delivering corporate services of different kinds. But I ended up, my last assignment at the city, I was handed the M365 implementation, and I'll tell you, I was pretty excited at that time, and I'll tell you that story. And so once that was completed, who knew, I ended up with a hot skill at the end of the day. And I was introduced to this fantastic CIO within the federal government, Shannon Archibald. And we had coffee, and here we are a year later, and I'm working with Shannon and Jeff Braybrook and the team at SSC to push M365 out at SSC. So I'm talking today about the tale of two implementations, and I use this visual not because one group went slow versus fast, but yet, in the context of COVID, absolutely they are two different experiences. So at the city, we had a planned implementation, although we threw it out the door within 15 months, which was a pretty fast time frame. But my experience here at SSC was really, a COVID-related implementation where it went 9 months ahead of schedule. So a little bit of a different cadence. So the stories that I'm going to talk about today will include, I'm going to take us through the city story, and then I'll move to SSC. But in both, for both organizations, I'll speak to the deployment, adoption, and then the shared lessons learned that we have, and then definitely we'll have time for some Q&A. So 365. So the story of the city of Ottawa is, at that time we had a very progressive CIO who now actually is CTO for the city of Seattle, believe it or not. But his name was Saad Bashir, and I had been pursuing Saad as a leader because I really wanted to work for him. So he finally gave me this chance. He tossed me in a room with 20 people and gave us this mandate and said, go. And he said, you have a year to do it. So it took us 15 months, but we got there. So the landscape at the city with respect to licenses was that the city had purchased full E3 licenses across the board, with the expectations that we knew we were going to potentially look at some F1 licensing for certain complements of employees. So the general office worker ended up with E3. So, and then we also used E5 for what we call light users. So those were, our firefighters that are, not sitting at desks all day and who just need mobile access, to some of our parks and rec staff, our childcare staff, and so on. And then in the end, we also ended up implementing some E5 licensing with the additional security package to have that additional protection for our elected officials and some of our senior leaders in the organization. So this is what our deployment rollout looked like. We were pushing Windows 10 out across the organization in, the best that we could, because sadly it was, hands to device. So we were having to schedule, those installations and so on. So that was happening. And then what we did was we worked department by department, well, really service area by service area within the city. So an example is traffic services. We might deploy 1 week. We go to paramedics the next week. We would go to social services the next week. So for a deployment for a specific service area looked like this. We would immediately, the morning of the deployment, turn on the license and allow the online enablement. We also overnight would have pushed out the 365 desktop. We also migrated email overnight and then pushed mobile to mobile phones for those that had them. So this is what we would call a big bang deployment all at once. So it was disruptive, and that's why we planned accordingly. And we had folks on site, whether it was at paramedics or traffic services or wherever it was, to help people sort out any kind of technical issues that may have occurred the day of deployment. Following that, we would follow up with a SharePoint engagement. So we were moving from, and I'll move to my next slide, but we were moving from traditional old school shared drives to SharePoint. So we didn't want it to be a free for all. So we had a very organized process where we would schedule meetings, have design sessions, get people involved in that design process for what their SharePoint sites were going to look like, and then we would roll it out from there. So the phases of the City of Ottawa program, because we had the luxury of, time to plan, is we did a lot of planning and technical readiness in our first phase. Then we moved to focusing on change management for the organization and some early adopters. So what a fun, early adopter program. We went out and got over 600 people from across, like 12,000 users, but 600 people that came with us on our first go with early adopters. They put up with all the little technical glitches that helped, that we had to work through, that got us to a better deployment later. Phase 3 was all about deployment, and as I mentioned, it was fast and furious. So week by week by week, we were talking hundreds, up to thousands of users in any given week. And then beyond that, we transitioned to operations and then focused on driving user adoption. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the key accomplishments for the city was that we actually delivered it in-house, and that was mandated by our CIO at the time because he had a focus on wanting to, build and grow and develop talent within the organization. So we brought in professional services, with actually only one consultant that we needed, but of course we partnered with our friends at Microsoft to help us out with some of those, some of the technical issues around email and so on. We had a great champions network across the board, so 600 grew to many, many more. We did tons of info sessions, lots of support. We had a first of its kind deployment model, that big bang model, and then so on. Adoption is a journey, and we had such a good time preparing the organization with respect to what was coming with deployment, and then really what does 365 mean, because people didn't really know what it means. Okay, we're moving to the cloud. What is that? So we actually used Journey as a soundtrack when we would host events and people would come in and it would be really fun and so on. So we hosted a number of leadership events at the Nepean Sportsplex, a lot, where people showed up, got to go to booths. We would host presentations on what was to come. We did a lot of kind of preparation around, executive deployments was really, really important to us. So we did lots of presentations for all of the senior leaders and for the elected officials, the mayor's office and the councillor's offices, to prepare them for what was coming as well. And then focused a lot. We had our deployment comms, our regular corporate comms, and then some of the supports that we had after the fact that I'll speak to now. So we tried to focus with adoption on moving from the me stuff to the we stuff. So when we first deployed, we wanted people to get settled with some of the tools that were affecting me as a person. So now, okay, well now I access email off of the network in a very different way. The way that I access it on my phone may look a little different. Oh, I'm able to download apps to my phone now. Oh, I'm able to open documents on my phone. So we focused on that me stuff to get people settled, and then we were starting to move into the we stuff, and I'll tell you that accelerated insanely once COVID came into play, right? A lot of people didn't have to collaborate, but they sure did once COVID hit. So some of our supports that we had set up, we did have a lot of self-help videos, and I will tell you there's pros and cons to that. So we had self-help videos for some of the technical issues that may arrive, so people migrating their PSTs, things like that. We had a lot of uptake on those, but with respect to training and self-serve on learning the tools, our self-help videos actually didn't get a whole lot of traction. So that's a bit of a lessons learned. So we ended up moving to old school training, and believe it or not, the classes were packed. We didn't really think it would happen, and a lot of the techies on my team said, oh, people don't like going to training. Well, they sure did. So we ended up launching a full training program to support people getting onto the platform, even people understanding that there's a portal. Like, that was new to a lot of people. How do I initiate my OneDrive? All of those great things. And then we moved on to intact training. So this is where we would send a trainer out to, and I'll give examples, a long-term care home. So you're talking about a bunch of nurses that their primary focus is to care for people, and they don't have a lot of time to learn about these tools and so on. They're used to using email. So we would focus sessions specifically on them to make sure that they understood, how they could leverage the tools and so on. So that was really, really a huge thing, and worked very well. So now moving on to shared services. So after I met Shannon Archibald and moved over to shared services, this is a funny story, but I ended up starting about 2 weeks after COVID had happened. So I have yet to even see the shared services offices beyond a presentation that I provided a couple of years ago. So the shared services mandate is to modernize the workplace through the delivery of digital collaboration tools and services. The licensing model primarily, again, is all E3, and I think all of GOC had purchased E3 licenses, but we are now considering stepping up to E5, and I know that a lot of other departments are as well, because there are pieces within E5 that can enable data and analytics, helping us with our modern desktop project, mobile functionality, and so on. So we're still considering moving to that, but doing our analysis and budgeting and so on. So the key milestones and timelines for shared services look a whole lot different than they did at the city, and because they had to. So Jeff, who's on the call here today, and his team, they had a fantastic plan. They were going to plan for almost, a year and then push it out to the organization. They were doing their readiness stuff, and then all of a sudden, overnight, they have to push it out the door. So 9 months ahead of schedule, Jeff and team pushed Teams and 365 online, including OneDrive, out to the organization. So we're talking about, 10,000 users. So initially, and I think still a lot of folks still believe that Teams is 365, even though there's so much more to that, but that went overnight. And then the next piece was kind of some remediation pieces about making sure that people for SSC employees and partner networks were able to access 365. Also enabling split tunneling so that, right now from home, we're not having to go through the network to be able to access Teams or participate in meetings. That was another key deliverable of the team. So since then, we have achieved protected B status. We still have some outstanding work to be doing around that, but we're there and signed off and good to go. We pushed out desktop, so that is, I believe, about 90% complete at this point. So people had the option to, unlike the city where we forced it, here at Shared Services, we offered it and asked people to go to the software center to upload. We're now working on a package deployment for MFA and mobile all in one. So Jeff and team are getting ready and going to be pushing that out through December and January. And we're considering that to be a really transformational item. One of Shannon Archibald, our CIO's mandates, and one of the things she wanted to do when she arrived was she enabled all employees with mobile phones. And I know that's not the case across GOC, but I was so thrilled to see that when I arrived. So once people get this, the full package downloaded, it really changes things that you're able to, walk around with your phone and join meetings, and you're not kind of stuck to the same spot all day and accessing your applications and so on. And most complex for SSC is the email migration. So in this case, we're moving a good portion of our employee complement from the traditional Yes service over to Exchange Online. There's lots of planning underway. We're focusing on May right now for our deployment. Excited to get there, but what a complicated journey. And then, of course, we'll continue to drive adoption. So the key achievements to date, obviously, I spoke to the accelerated deployment. Live events like the one that we're participating in right now, because we're all at home, that the need for that just skyrocketed. So that's something at the city that really wasn't even a need at the time. But right now at SSC, Jeff and his team are doing probably several a week. Also, we're a pathfinder for the GC, so we're contributing significantly to the digital communication and collaboration playbook, so that other GOC departments will be able to take advantage of some of not just our lessons learned, but how we navigated to getting to where we are. And we're doing lots of presentations and chatting with people about these things. And we have also, we're very proud of some of the change management and adoption supports we have that I'll speak to in a moment. So at SSC, we're focusing on new ways of working. So at the city, I spoke about, we did like me to we. And here we're focusing on new ways of working, including collaboration right at the outset, because it is an absolute requirement and need working from home. So we're trying to focus the bar with respect to even measuring adoption on these 4 things. So connecting and communicating using Teams, Outlook, and OneNote, effective meetings with Teams, Outlook, Planner, and OneNote, working smarter with documents, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about documents with our experience with at shared services in a moment. But this is very different. Many departments are used to using GC docs and we're mandated to do so, and that this is a big change management effort. What? I'm allowed to save things in a OneDrive, but once you get going and saving something in 365, you kind of never want to go back. So that's a challenge. And then of course we have working from anywhere, which is the mobile piece as well. So Jeff and his team have put together a number of foundational adoption and change management supports. So we have a training program that was required right at the outset. We did encourage people to take advantage of some of the Microsoft training that was pushed out at COVID, but in our environment, it was very different. The cadence of our deployment was different. We had our own tenant right at the start, so it was a little different than the experience for other departments, so we developed our own training. We also engagement and communication. We have people that work almost full time on the communications piece because we're doing this kind of our rollout is in a bit of a cadence. We have so many communications that need to come with all of these pieces to prepare users and to help them land softly. And most successful, in my opinion, because I just love participating in it, is the Champions program. So we have over 200 people that are participating in this program, bi-weekly meetings. They get all the newest information, all the coolest tips and tricks. They're kind of our advanced users. So participating in those meetings is just so fun because you see the excitement and then you see folks actually teaching each other how to do things. So it's creating this kind of, it's mushrooming from there where people are checking in with each other on user support things and then able to drive adoption in their own teams. So what I'm most excited about being at SSC is, at the city, I was responsible for deployment and that was fun and a great learning experience, but I really wanted to take things to the next level. And so I'm in the process right now of working on a longer term 1 to 3 year M365 roadmap. So we know we have to complete our technical deployments and remediations to get to full functionality, and we're going to get there by the spring of next year. We've enabled the productivity and collaboration tool sets, but we still have a little more to go there. We want to look at decommissioning redundant technology. So when you consider some of those other tools folks were using for, whether it's Jabber for messaging, which we had also used at the city, well, we don't need that anymore. Maybe even landlines, reconsidering landlines entirely because our employee complement have smartphones. Looking at Synergy is actually SharePoint on-prem that we're looking to migrate over to SharePoint Online. Driving adoption of these collaboration tool sets is key, and we have some of those foundational pieces for sure, but we still have a long way to go with some of the other applications that folks probably aren't even really aware of. So, Planner for project management light. I am still really trying to get towards, I'm trying to do a proof of concept on Yammer because I'm super interested to see what Yammer has to offer. Right now we have challenges with the data residing in the US, but I'm going to be running a pilot soon just to see what's possible with respect to, engaging people in the organization, because that's really what that tool is supposed to be. We have Stream for our internal YouTube, that's what I call it, to be hosting videos. Sway is another fancy pants way of doing presentations. So still a long way to go. And then there's the advanced platform as well. So we need to be, considering Power BI, and already we're getting there and we have some pilots in place. SharePoint, and I'll speak to it right now, but probably a little more in our lessons learned as well. So we're considering it at shared services now. Well, we're watching carefully to see what Treasury Board is doing. I know that they're doing some pilots on using M365 exclusively for file and content management, and we would probably love to go that way as well, but we have to be mindful of the policies as well. So lots of work to be done there. And I also would love to be running, well, we already do have a couple of sites up using SharePoint Online for intranet, and instead of using like our traditional intranet to post all of our information, even all of our 365 stuff is posted on on SharePoint Online, which is really great. And then, of course, taking advantage of, Power Apps and Power Automate. So we've already launched the use of a Power App for business resumption, where folks are going to be able to book time in the office and so on. So we're already getting there with innovation. So lessons learned, I'll go through some of them, but this is just kind of the title slide for where I'll head with this. Proposed program structure. I have spoken to a number of federal departments in my time at the city, and then since I've arrived here, and I find some departments almost consider this to be like, oh, it's an Office 2016 rollout. Let's mimic the team that we needed for that. And this is certainly not the case. And many 365 program structures, in my opinion, are under-resourced. So this is what I would recommend as best practice, is to make sure that you have appropriate technical leads that are going to be dealing with the complicated stuff around, the desktop and the phone enablement, and of course Exchange Online, very complicated. I also suggest there's a business support group that is just dealing with outreach and governance and so on. That, again, a lesson learned from the city and even at shared services as well, as we're struggling to catch up with some of those key business governance items that need to be put into play. So I suggest 4 areas for your program if you do put one together. So I had a deployment team at the city, which was fantastic, so they could focus exclusively on that. We had user support within the team. So I know this is not always the case. It's not the case at shared services. We are relying on our frontline help desk that is, a shared help desk with other departments. But at the city, I had folks internal that were dealing with user support, because that's where you learn, what's really happening with users out there, and it helps to inform your communications and inform your adoption supports. I also suggest that you have a SharePoint practice set up right from the outset, because SharePoint is so big, it needs its own leadership. There's so many policy pieces that come with that, that it needs appropriate resourcing and leadership. And then, of course, change management, which is key to this project, is to make sure that you have a change management lead, but also to bring in people that have 365 specific experience. It's so helpful to have that. And at SSC, we've been, we're blessed with having an amazing consultant actually that comes to us from Orangutech, who has all of that background and who can guide us down that path. So with respect to technical readiness, some little things that we hit along the way. So at SSC, split tunneling was absolutely an issue. At the city, internet bandwidth, we had made a lot of assumptions around, our network and our internet bandwidth, and we had done some tests, only to realize once we were starting to deploy hundreds and hundreds a week that that the internet was choking up. So we actually had to stop deployment for, I believe, almost 6 weeks, while teams on the network side ran out and increased our bandwidth and allowed us to keep going. So we're grateful for that, but it was definitely a lesson learned. Having your boardrooms up and ready, and I know that that's not applicable right now, but at the city, when we pushed out Teams, people got really excited about using Teams functionality, but yet it didn't speak very well to some of the Cisco equipment that we had in our boardrooms. So making sure you have that integration plan is really important, or else you're not going to be able to take advantage of your investment. Email migration, I can't say enough about that. I often, in every presentation I give, I say, if you blow out someone's email and you lose their trust forever, right? That is what people are working in, day out. It's their communication method. Yes, we have Teams, but people still need their email. So having appropriate prep, understanding the impacts to users prior to email migration is critical. Just warning people about what's going to happen is so important. And then desktop uptake. So that's a lesson for me. So we forced desktop at the city. Did we, could we have done it a different way? The way that SSC is rolling it out slowly and allowing people to do it themselves is working just as well as the Big Bang. So that was a lesson for me. So change management, this is not just a technology project. It is really ultimately a change management project, because once the technology is in place, it's all about moving users to these new ways of working and to be working together. And for both programs that I've had the pleasure of leading, success really equals adoption. Deployment is just an activity, but adoption is really where you want to get to. So some adoption assumptions that are lessons learned for myself is specifically at the city is the organization will not just adopt the tools organically. We hoped that would happen, but that was not the case. It actually took until COVID for people to really get on board, and for people all across the organization to be forced to using these new tools. So keep that in mind, and that users would self-serve adoption support. So we have at the city and at shared services, we have these great communication sites on SharePoint online. They're beautiful. They have tons of FAQs, all kinds of great info, but people don't necessarily self-serve, and that's it's a product of our environment and having time to do so. And also knowing that all users are not equal with respect to adoption. So considering the profiles of who your audience are, we're fortunate at SSC, we're an IT organization, so people are a little more likely to play with things and move things along, but there's still a complement of executive assistants that they have great systems for doing things, and they don't want this new technology messing with their systems that they're using, with Outlook and so on. So we have to bring people along at different cadences and appreciate some of their fears and maybe limitations with respect to adopting technology and helping them along. So governance and some policy implications, document management. Oh my goodness. So we all want, easy, like day-to-day access, sharing, storing, search, and so on. 365 is it's amazing. Once you get there, you kind of never want to go back. So I will tell you, I've joined SSC and I'm struggling with GC docs. I have to get someone to keep me out of trouble and to save things there, because it's not where I want to be. When you're opening documents and people are in them and you can't save them and you can't change them, it's really hard to go back. But what's really important that SSC didn't have the opportunity to manage up front was considering, really the retention policies, disposition, legal hold. At the city, we had the opportunity to do some of that planning in advance and prepare the organization, but we're just catching up with that at SSC. So making sure that you have your privacy assessments complete is really important, and to be working with ATIP to know kind of what the discovery processes are for pulling out information, having retention policies. We're talking about that on chat right now so that we're not running into those discovery processes later. Some of those things we kind of think of after the fact. Security. MFA was something that we had not had prepared at the city, but it was kind of a force that we had some security issues that forced us to push it out the door very quickly. So making sure that that you kind of have that well in hand, that your users understand why you're doing it, what the impacts are to that. Another thing that we had to do at the city was to limit access to our tenant to North America, so just Canada and the US. So anyone who ended up traveling, which many, well, when we used to travel, would travel to, Mexico or to Europe on vacation and used to bring their work phones and expect to access their email, they were no longer able to do that. So that was a big change for the city. Considering data residency is really important, especially when it comes to some of the applications that you may want to be using, like Microsoft Forms, which is one of my favorites, but the data is in the US. Yammer is the same, so considerations of that as well. Surveys versus data collection. I speak about that for Forms. So we've had a lot of confusion at shared services about Microsoft Forms, which you could use as a survey, but that's not its primary function. It's also a data collection tool. So that's a lesson that we've tripped over, and we're struggling pushing it out the door because people are worried we're going to be surveying the world with it, when really it kind of has multiple purposes. So, and how we addressed a lot of these things after the fact is to develop guidance in the absence of policy, because we know policies are catching up and it will take time to do so. So we just teach people to do the right things the best we can, as in, save your stuff in GC docs until such time that we get to full 365. License management, and so again, this both organizations, same thing, is understanding your licensing needs and the scenarios that fit with those needs is really, really important. So E3 seems like when you're first negotiating with Microsoft, it seems like it's what you need and so on. But understanding, that maybe there are different use cases. So at the city, we did use F1, which is a lighter license, because we were able to use that for some of our employee complement, where at SSC, we're actually considering E5 because wouldn't it be great if everyone had a, data analytics attached to their license, because we're a different type of organization. So I suggest at the front end to be really researching what those license packages provide you with, and so that you're not doing it after the fact. And understanding your category of employees is also very important as well. So example is, if you're going to be forecasting to have 10,000 licenses next year, what are you doing about your summer students? So you're going to have people there for 4 months of the year, and then there's the onboarding and offboarding processes that come with that. How are you going to pay for the full year, that kind of thing. So that forecasting, as I'm just mentioning, is really critical, and understanding your onboarding and offboarding process, what your legal holds are as well, and being prepared for that annual true up and true down. So I would start preparing for that 6 months well in advance so that you're ready and know where you're headed. And so that comes to the end of the formal presentation, and I hope I haven't even looked at the time. I've been talking a lot. Oh, good. We have lots of time for questions. So yeah, I've had a great time with both organizations. I have to say, it's been wonderful, and looking forward to hearing any questions or ideas that you have. Silvana, I think I'm passing it along to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was great. So we have had several questions asked. You can continue placing your questions in the sidebar if you have any. We'll begin. So Shannon, how did you address the Power Apps licensing consideration to limit employees from creating their own Power Apps once they are licensed to use the app that you launched?
So I have a personal opinion on that one. Anyway, I will guess that a lot of leaders in the applications group may not like my opinion, but I believe in set it free. Personally, we're paying for this amazing package of tools that's not just Teams. Like there's so many options for innovating things, and I would say, why not set it free? Creating guidance and support, and maybe even a catalog of use cases and that kind of thing, I think is important. But I would rather see these things set free. And I often I think back to early days. Like I said, I've run lots of municipal programs, and people used to use Microsoft Access, right? Oh, we loved Access. It was great. And so you'd hire a summer student who was so keen and would build you the best Access database ever, and then the student would leave, and then IT was all upset that you didn't know how to support it. But my thought on that is, what if we had never let people build that Access database? They were improving their businesses. Let them improve their businesses, and if we have to come in and sweep up the mess after, then we do it. That's Shannon Kenny's opinion. So, but that is still yet to be decided.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. So how did you address adopting the M365 networking principles? So for example, split VPN tunnel for all the M365 traffic.
What was the start of the question?
How did you address adopting the M365 networking principles?
I think it was forced, right? People were working from home. Mm-hmm. At first, we had to tell people not to use video, right? Don't use video, it's going to crash, it's not going to work, just use chat, just start out with meetings. So really it was an easy decision once we got to, my goodness, we need to see each other, we need to be collaborating and so on. So we definitely, that was an easy one at SSC. So it's a little bit different at the city. So we allowed people to bring their own device at the city. You could install 365 on up to 5 devices, your own personal phone. So even our firefighters, they don't have phones, but but they use their personal phone to do that. And that's not the case within government. So that's still a restriction that we have in place in government. And it's not a battle that I'm going to win, but it is something I'm watching very carefully.
Okay. Just remind us again how many employees were involved in the migration, I guess, both on the city and from SSC.
So the city, we had about 20 people.
Okay.
But that included, like I said, we had our own little support desk, right? Internally, we had folks working on, email migration pieces. We had change management people, we had comms people, trainers, all of that. And then at SSC, it's probably closer to 15, but I want to up it. Yeah. So right now, Jeff's team, they're great, but they're having to deliver a project and support at the same time, right? They're kind of like doing two things at once, as Jeff said, building and flying the plane at the same time. So in a perfect world, we'd have a few more folks. So what we're looking to do is transition some of our project resources over to adoption in time and solutions.
Okay. So speaking of change management, I know you touched on this a little bit, but what was your strategy in dealing with the outliers and the request to move away from the city's standard MS stack?
So say the last thing, the last word you said?
MS stack, like Microsoft stack.
Oh, okay. How do we move people away? Well, it was really one group at a time, I think, which was important. So the outliers. So to me, actually, not the biggest outliers, but I found people in admin roles, executive assistants, they have been there for many, many years. Don't mess with their email, don't mess with their stuff. They were really difficult to bring along. So we actually did we've had a lot of a focused adoption events just for them. So we would bring them in to just tease them a bit about, oh, look at what's possible. Look at this. Your general manager will be able to see a document on their phone if you use, if you save something here and so on. So really having the what's in it for me's for each of those groups is so critical. So we had to do the same for firefighters. Like, what matters to them? Honestly, what mattered to them is having a messaging system so that they didn't have to use Facebook Messenger to message each other on the weekends about switching shifts or. Right, that's what matters.
Yeah.
For childcare workers, they were using personal email to submit their schedules every week. Instead, we used forms. So you send out a link and everyone filled out their availability just through, a message on Teams, and bam, it's populated. So that saved them time. So it's really, I think, about finding use cases that work for specific business groups. And then you bring them in slowly, and then you teach them new things and teach them new things.
Yeah, it's almost the little things that make the world of difference, and the quick wins for the end users, I think, are the things we're all going after right now in this transition period.
That's right. And executives can be some of the hardest, right, to get because they have their systems as well. So with a lot of times I spoke to executives at the city about being in council meetings, right? So they're literally they're there in their suits and, all the politics are going on and they're able to actually access documents, because it used to be like, message my admin to send me a document that I open on my phone. You could just access it anywhere, anytime. So again, it's finding what works for them.
Nice. And I know you talked about the success of your in-class training. So there's a question here about, was it difficult to get the budget or the resources to provide this in-class or virtual training? And do you have any tips regarding how to get these resources for providing this type of training?
Yeah, really good question. So yes, it is hard to get budget, right? Because IT traditionally loves to push things out to the organization, and then what are we doing to support it? So sadly, I will say at the city we developed a training program because we had to, and it was eventually cut. Things happen, right? But then again, COVID happened, so I'm curious. I've left since then, so I'm curious to maybe that kind of forced some training after the fact. But so yeah, it was definitely difficult, and we had to create our own content. We had gone out to some third-party providers, but it couldn't be specific to our environment, right? It's like, what is the city's environment? What did we enable? What are we turning off? All of that. So same with SSC. So what Jeff and his team did, so Jeff has his own trainer, and we're working together to actually build content that's specific to our environment. We're actually building some learning journeys. so that people know, like, okay, I start with 365 basics and I move to here and I move to there. So yeah, I think having your own trainer that is literally a part of your team is key. So, and also that's connected with some of the user support people so that they know what are the glitches people are having out there so you can address things in the training. So we're doing it through lessons learned and it's working out really well. We're adjusting all the time. But the budget's hard. We've been talking to our learning people about them giving us some budget as well. So negotiating smart.
Yes, for sure. I think that change management part is so important. And I know the last time you presented last year, your focus was primarily on the change management aspect. And I think in this day and age, including the end users is so important. And I think we're seeing it everywhere. But as I've been talking to different departments over the last couple of years as well, sometimes you're preparing to put out a vehicle or contract for bringing people in to help with this, and change management is always the part that you forget. And it's, you know, reminding everyone that yes, we need the developers, we need the architects, but change management is also just as important, and getting them involved early, not at the end, once the project's almost complete. So
you got it. So here's a rule of thumb: 50% of your resources should be business resources on your program. That's at the city. I started with all techs and one comms person, and at the end we evolved to 50-50. So that is definitely you need people that can speak English, you know, and luckily or not, so I'm not technical, so I hope you don't give me any technical questions, Sylvana, because I'll like run out my door. But yeah, I'm passionate about change management, and I look at it through the eyes of the user, right? So if you're a technical lead that's running this program, I hope that you have a good person beside you that can poke you and remind you that you need to focus on the users.
Take note, everyone. That's a good point for sure. Now, I know Jeff was answering some questions here in the chat, but there was, let me see here, where was he responding? Question around teams. So I'm curious what model you're using for deploying teams within teams while managing team sprawl.
Okay, good question.
So I don't know if you wanted to answer that or if Jeff wanted to jump in.
Well, I'll speak to both. How about that?
Yeah.
So at the city, we actually, with our early adopters, we set it free, and within a month there were 300 sites set up and most of them abandoned. Okay, so we went to way the other way and we locked it down. I'm still not sure I agree with that in retrospect, but we locked it down and we forced people actually to get a team, either for project purposes where we would have like a simply architected site that we would give out, or if you wanted like one to run your business. So I'm like running a social services center, I want a team site, we would architect it with SharePoint in the background so that all of your document management was set up and your document libraries and all of that piece. So that was the what happened at the city. And within shared services, we also have it locked down right now, but it's a fairly simple process that you ask for a team. We ask people to take some training just so they understand channel management, all of that stuff. So it's fairly simple, and then it's pushed out the door from there.
Okay.
But in both cases, it's not set free. But you could argue either way. My Microsoft friends might argue the other way, but
governance is a big thing right now in that conversation. So sure. Another question here. Have you put in place some form of active monitoring on Microsoft rollout to better manage the constant changes and updates that are rolling out? Example, when lists went live in Teams or the upcoming approvals in Teams.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we have any. Actually, I might have to give that one to Jeff, because I don't think we have things locked down. We're monitoring it carefully, but Jeff, do you want to jump in on that one?
I'm sure, I'm happy to do so. I just won't go on camera. All right, so yes, we do. And that's part of our whole service. And we watch the announcements on Microsoft now. To answer Matthew, because Matthew is at TDS and I know Matthew, I know they've moved their mail. So there's many more announcements on the Microsoft notification board. We watch it like a hawk all day, all the time. Many of them relate to email. And any given week, there isn't something that necessarily impacts or the users would see. liking a change or something. It might be just this is coming and that's coming, but a lot of it, we put it into our weekly change management. We have a release management meeting that Shannon runs every Monday. And we say, as part of our continued rolling out more deployment, what's coming next? Should the CIO, should there be an all employees announcement communique because it's exciting? And if it's something that we're just deciding to roll out, that's fine. But we include in that discussion, hey, there's a Microsoft notification that something's changing. So for example, in the next 2 months, Microsoft's really got their head around the way people look at meetings. So they're tightening down the chat function so it acts like it's just a meeting. For example, that's coming. We will tell the users about that. That's it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. So one more question coming in here. We still have a few more minutes, so if anyone still has questions, feel free to put them in the sidebar and we'll make sure they get published. So was there a security assessment that the Crown Corporation can reference for justification for a split VPN tunnel for M365 traffic? So was there a security assessment that was done?
I'm sure that there was under our authority to operate for Protected B. But maybe if that person wants, we can take that one away.
Okay.
Yes, I'll jump in.
Okay.
The main service line of SSC provides split tunneling on request, basically, for departments. We were one that wanted it, and we can put you in touch or get you the information on what that's all about if another organization is interested in, having to go through that themselves.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions out there? Barry, did you want to answer a question? Saw your hand go up there. Oh, you're on mute, Barry. There we go.
Quote of 2020.
Yes.
I'm answering the question from Helen from CBSA. Your perspective in GC Docs is probably shared by many GOC users. What can we do to make things better? Any thoughts about integrating M365 and GC Docs? Certainly, EPMO, GC Docs, we're looking at this at PSPC. There are implementations of SharePoint to GC Docs, particularly Transport Canada has done one. I think they've rolled that out or soon to be rolling that out. We are working with the department and we fully intend to do a presentation mid-January. We'll make sure everybody here is invited. It's an Orangutech seminar and it'll be on EDRMS on M365. It'll be E5 Protected B. So we'll do that presentation in mid-January. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Any other last minute questions coming in here? We still have 8 minutes with Shannon. If anyone has any specific questions regarding either the city or SSC, feel free to jump in here. No. As we wait for a few more to jump in, I will let you know we are planning to have our last Government of Canada Office 365 Council meeting the 3rd Thursday of December. I know Christmas parties might not be as prevalent these days, so I think we're still going to be all working at our desks that day. So we are still looking for a presenter that day. We have a few ideas, but if anyone in the audience wants to present, please reach out to Barry and the Orangutech team, and we'll make sure to connect with you. And we'll make sure that we get out invites as soon as we have a presenter locked down.
We also have Global Affairs presenting at the end of January.
We do. And it's been a while since we've heard from them, so it'll be exciting to check back in and see what they've been up to over the last 18 months, probably. All right, so I don't see any other questions coming in, so I think we will wrap it up for today. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to check back in with you and hear this hybrid presentation around your experience at the city and now that you've been at SSC for almost 10 months. And it's pretty interesting to see how the lessons learned are pretty similar. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in the audience that are experiencing the same thing, which is the exact reason why Orangutech started this Office 365 Council back in June 2018 when we did, because the reality is all the departments are on the same journey to the cloud. And yes, we're unique, but a lot of the implementation strategies, the plans, the challenges, the lessons learned, and ultimately the successes are going to be very similar. And it's important that we're tuning in with one another, especially when we can't be meeting in person, to stay connected on how that progress is going. So thank you so much, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, guys.
Take care.
We will publish this as well. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.